I'm at my sister Rachel's place in Mississauga for Sunday dinner, right? Just a regular family thing. I walk into her kitchen to grab a drink, and out of nowhere, my 6-year-old nephew Tyler runs up to me and slaps me across the face. Hard. Not a kid's playful tap. I'm talking a full-on smack that made my cheeks sting and my eyes water. I'm standing there in shock, and this little kid looks me dead in the eye and goes, "Mommy says you deserve it because you're poor." Hey everyone, how's it going today? I'm glad you're here with me. Before we dive into this one, do me a favor, go grab yourself a coffee, or brew some tea. Get comfy on your couch, cause this story's gonna take a minute. This is about family, betrayal, and what happens when you finally snap after years of taking it. I couldn't breathe for a second. The kitchen went silent. My sister Rachel was standing by the stove, pretending she didn't hear anything, but I saw her shoulders tense up. My mom Diane was sitting at the kitchen table, and instead of being horrified, she started laughing. Actually laughing. Asterisk. Asterisk. What do you do when your own family teaches their kids to disrespect you? When they use children as weapons? Drop a comment and let me know, cause this was just the beginning of me realizing how toxic my family really was. Asterisk, asterisk. Tyler ran back to Rachel, and she gave him a cookie. Rewarded him. My mom wiped tears from her eyes and said, "Kids say the darndest things, eh?" Like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. I looked at Rachel and asked her what the hell she was teaching her son. She shrugged and said, "Maybe if you had a real job instead of working at that gallery, Tyler wouldn't have anything to say." That's when it hit me. They'd been talking about me behind my back. My own sister and my mom, sitting around discussing how I was a failure, how I was poor, how I'd never amount to anything. And they'd said it so often that Tyler, a 6-year-old kid, thought it was normal to hit me and call me poor. I left Rachel's house without eating dinner, drove back to my apartment near Christie Station with my hands shaking on the wheel. But this wasn't the first time my family had humiliated me. It was just the first time they'd used a child to do it. See, my mom Diane has always thought she was the funniest person in every room. She'd been doing stand-up comedy at open mics around Toronto for years, never getting past those 5-minute slots at dive bars in Parkdale, but she called herself a professional comedian. Her whole identity was wrapped up in making people laugh, even if it meant absolutely torching anyone around her for a punchline. And my sister Rachel? She worshipped Diane, wanted to be just like her. They were like this comedy duo from hell, always at my expense. Growing up in our cramped apartment near Christie Pitts, every embarrassing thing I did became material for Diane's act. When I had an accident at 7, she told it at my birthday party like it was hilarious. When I got my first period and bled through my jeans at Vaughan Road Academy, she made it her closing bit for months. The kids at school heard about it, obviously, because someone's older sister was at one of her shows. Rachel would add her own commentary, tell her friends at school about my failures, my awkwardness, everything. She was 3 years older than me and used every bit of it to make me feel small. But the worst thing Diane ever pulled happened at my engagement party 3 months ago. And Rachel was right there, egging her on. I'd been with my fiancé Marcus for 5 years, and we finally decided to tie the knot. The engagement party was at Marcus's parents' place in Oakville, this beautiful house backing onto the ravine, with all his family, his dad's business partners from the firm, and everyone important in his world. Diane showed up already half-cut, wearing this sparkly jumpsuit like she was performing at Massey Hall or something. Rachel came with her, dressed almost identically, like they'd coordinated their outfits. They kept butting into conversations, telling jokes that bombed hard. People smiled politely, but you could tell they were uncomfortable as hell. Halfway through dinner, Diane clinked her glass for a speech nobody asked for. Rachel stood up next to her like they were doing a double act. Diane started going on about how proud she was that I'd found someone willing to marry me despite everything. Rachel nodded along, adding, "Yeah, we never thought this day would come, did we, Mom?" Then Diane said she had this hilarious story about why she never thought I'd get married. She told everyone about when I was 19 and had a complete mental breakdown. Not just mentioned it, performed it like a full comedy routine. She mimicked me crying, acted out me begging her to help me, did this impression of me saying I didn't want to be here anymore. She told them about finding me with pills, the ambulance ride, the 3-day psychiatric hold at CAMH. Rachel jumped in with her own commentary, making sound effects, acting out the paramedics carrying me out of our apartment. She actually got down on the floor to show how I'd collapsed in our bathroom. People weren't laughing. Marcus's mom had tears streaming down her face. His dad looked absolutely sick. His brother walked straight out the front door, but Diane and Rachel kept going, feeding off each other like some twisted comedy team. Diane said, "The best part was when the psychiatrist said she felt worthless, and he goes, 'Well, at least you're self-aware.'" Both of them laughed at the joke while 50 people sat there in horrified silence. Marcus didn't know any of this. I'd been planning to tell him eventually, on my own terms, but not like this. Not as entertainment for his entire family and his dad's Bay Street colleagues. His grandmother was clutching her chest. His business partners were exchanging these looks. Diane and Rachel finally noticed nobody was laughing. Diane goes, "Tough crowd, eh?" And Rachel added, "Yeah, rich people have no sense of humor," before they both sat down like they'd absolutely killed it. Marcus's family left immediately. Half of them haven't spoken to me since. They think I'm unstable, or that it runs in the family after seeing Diane and Rachel's performance. Marcus almost called off the engagement. It took months of couples therapy for him to trust that I was okay, that it was a one-time crisis years back. Diane never apologized, said I was too sensitive and that comedy comes from truth. Rachel backed her up, said I should be grateful they made me memorable. They actually used the engagement party story in their next set at the Rivoli, talking about how wealthy people from the suburbs have no sense of humor. Asterisk, asterisk. Here's my question for you. When someone crosses a line like that, what do? Do you forgive and move on, or do you show them how it feels? I'd love to know what you think. 'Cause what happened after Tyler slapped me, I'm still not sure if I did the right thing. Hit that like button if you've been in this position. So after Tyler slapped me and called me poor, something in me just broke. I'd spent 28 years taking their abuse, their humiliation, their constant putting me down. I'd let them turn my suicide attempt into comedy. I'd let them ruin my engagement party. I'd let them poison my relationship with Marcus's family. But using Tyler, teaching a 6-year-old to hit me and call me poor, that was it. That was the line. The wedding was set for 2 months out. Diane assumed she'd be giving a speech, already working on material. Rachel kept sending me joke ideas for the reception, all of them about how I was marrying up, how Marcus was rescuing me from poverty, how his family must be saints to accept me. I told them both flat out they weren't giving speeches. They laughed and said I couldn't stop the mother and sister of the bride from talking. That's when I decided they needed to learn what it felt like. The week after Tyler slapped me, I invited all of Diane's comedy friends to what she thought was my bachelorette party. Told her we were doing it at this comedy club space in Kensington Market. She was thrilled I was including her scene, her people. Rachel was excited too. Thought this meant I was finally embracing their lifestyle. They brought about 20 folks from their open mic circuit, all wannabe comedians who thought they were funnier than they actually were. I said I wanted to do a roast, but with a twist. We'd roast our parents for all the crazy stuff they did raising us. Diane loved it. Said, "Finally, you're developing a sense of humor, kiddo." Rachel added, "Yeah, maybe you're not completely uptight after all." They went first, tag-teaming stories about my childhood that made me sound pathetic. They did a whole bit about me crying when I didn't make the volleyball team in grade 9. They acted out me asking for money for prom. They made fun of my first boyfriend, my college choices, my job at the gallery. Other people in the room were laughing along, and I just sat there, waiting. Then it was my turn. I started with how my mom got pregnant with me at 16 by her married drama teacher at Etobicoke Collegiate, Mr. Patterson. How she blackmailed him for money until his wife found out, and he drove his car into a tree on the 401. How Diane kept the suicide note that mentioned her by name, kept it in a shoebox under her bed. The comedians stopped laughing. I kept going about how Diane gave me Tylenol with codeine to make me sleep through her parties when I was little. How she brought men home who would comment on how I was developing when I was 12, 13 years old. How she told me to be nicer to them because they helped pay rent. Then I turned to Rachel. Told everyone how she'd stolen my identity when she was 19 to open credit cards. How she'd racked up 15 grand in debt in my name and left me to deal with it. How I'd spent years rebuilding my credit while she bought designer bags and went on trips. I told them about how Rachel had slept with my boyfriend when I was 17. Not just any boyfriend, but the first guy I'd ever loved. How she'd laughed about it afterward. Said she was doing me a favor by showing me what kind of guy he really was. I described the time Rachel told Child Services that Diane was a fit mother when the social worker came to investigate, even though she knew Diane was wasted half the time and had men coming and going at all hours. Rachel lied to protect Diane because she wanted to be just like her. I told them about Diane stealing my college fund from my grandma's inheritance, money that was supposed to get me through U of T, and spending it on comedy workshops at Second City that she failed out of. Rachel knew about it and helped convince Grandma that I didn't need the money because I wasn't college material anyway. I told them about both of them getting fired from multiple jobs. Tim Hortons, Shoppers, the LCBO, everywhere. For stealing, for showing up drunk, for being inappropriate with customers. The room went dead silent. Diane tried to laugh it off, but I wasn't done. I pulled out my phone and showed them screenshots. Screenshots of the text messages Rachel had sent me over the years, calling me worthless, telling me I was a burden, saying I'd never amount to anything. Screenshots of her teaching Tyler to call me poor auntie and the broke one. There were dozens of them. Messages from when I was in university, struggling to make ends meet while paying off her debt. "At least I have a life," one said. "You're just jealous because you're stuck working at Starbucks while I actually enjoy myself." Another one from 2 years ago. "Mom and I were laughing about how you still take the TTC everywhere. Like, how embarrassing is that at your age? Just admit you're a failure." And the most recent ones, from just last month, teaching Tyler about the real world. "Some people work hard and succeed, others make excuses. He needs to know the difference." I scrolled through them slowly, letting everyone in the room see. Lucy gasped. Ted's face went red with anger, but not at me, at them. Greg shook his head in disbelief. I showed them the credit card statements with Rachel's signature that didn't match mine. I showed them the police report I'd filed, the one that went nowhere because Rachel claimed it was a family misunderstanding, and I dropped it to avoid drama. I showed them the letters from collections agencies, the ones that had destroyed my credit score for 5 years. I showed them the child services report that mentioned both Diane and Rachel by name. The report that detailed coming home to find me alone at 12 years old, with no food in the fridge and Diane passed out on the couch. The report that Rachel had contradicted with her testimony, lying through her teeth to protect Diane's reputation. Then I told them about last Sunday, about how Tyler, my 6-year-old nephew, had slapped me across the face and said I deserved it because I was poor, about how the hit had been hard enough to leave a red mark on my cheek for an hour, about how I'd stood there in Rachel's kitchen, tears in my eyes, and nobody had defended me, about how Rachel had rewarded him with a cookie, a chocolate chip cookie from the fancy bakery on Bloor, the kind that cost $5 each. She'd given it to him right in front of me, smiling like he'd done something clever. about how Diane had laughed so hard she'd had to wipe tears from her eyes, about how she'd said, "Kids tell the truth, don't they? No filter." Like teaching a child that poverty equals worthlessness was funny. Like teaching a boy that it's acceptable to hit women was a joke. "My sister," I said, looking straight at Rachel, "is teaching her son that it's okay to hit women, that it's okay to hurt people who have less money than you. And my mother thinks it's hilarious." Ted stood up first, not looking at any of us, and just walked out. Lucy stared at Diane and Rachel with her mouth hanging open, the way you stare at a car accident on the DVP. Kira held her phone up the whole time, recording everything, and I could see that little red light still going. The vindication felt electric, like pure energy in my chest. But underneath it, something cold was spreading through my stomach. I'd just destroyed my mother and sister in front of everyone they knew, everyone who made up their whole social lives. Asterisk, asterisk, take a second and think about this with me. Was what I did justified? If someone humiliates you publicly, uses a child as a weapon against you, do you have the right to do it back to them? That whole eye for an eye thing, does it actually make anything better? Let me know in the comments what you think, cause I'm genuinely curious how you'd handle this. Asterisk, asterisk. Diane tried to laugh, that fake comedian laugh she used when jokes bombed, but her voice cracked halfway through. Rachel's face had gone bright red, then white. She stood up and started yelling at me, calling me a liar, saying I was making everything up for attention. I pulled out more receipts. Literally. I had bank statements showing the stolen money. I had the police report from when I'd tried to press charges about the identity theft. I had messages from Rachel's friends confirming the story about my boyfriend. Rachel lunged at me. Actually tried to physically attack me. Two of the comedians had to hold her back while she screamed that I'd ruined her life, that Tyler's daycare would hear about this, that Marcus's family would find out what kind of person I really was. She was kicking, trying to break free from Ted and Greg who were holding her arms. Her face was red and contorted, spit flying from her mouth as she yelled, "You're a liar. You've always been a liar. Everything was fine until you had to make it all about you." "Everything was fine?" I said, my voice shaking. "Rachel, you taught your son to hit me. You stole my identity. You ruined my credit. You slept with Jake just to hurt me. When exactly was everything fine? I was 19 when the credit card thing happened. I made a mistake. You were old enough to know better, and you never apologized. You never tried to make it right. You just let me struggle while you pretended it never happened." Someone's phone was recording all of this. I could see at least 3 people had their cameras out now. This would be all over Toronto's comedy scene by tomorrow. Maybe that was what needed to happen. "They already know what kind of people you are," I said, my voice steady now despite the shaking in my hands. "They saw it at my engagement party. Marcus's family watched you and Mom perform my suicide attempt like it was a sketch." His grandmother, a 78-year-old woman, had to leave the room because she was so disgusted. His brother didn't speak to him for a month because he thought Marcus was making a huge mistake marrying into our family. Diane opened her mouth and the word liar came out, weak and desperate. She said I was exaggerating, that I always made things bigger than they were, but her hands were shaking so hard she had to grab the table for support. The other comedians were looking at each other, having these silent conversations. Greg cleared his throat and suggested we all take a break, maybe get some air. His voice sounded too loud in the quiet room. People started moving toward the door in this awkward shuffle, not talking, just chairs scraping and feet shuffling. Rachel grabbed her purse and stormed out, still yelling threats over her shoulder. Within 5 minutes, the room emptied until it was just me and Diane sitting across from each other at a table covered in empty pints and wadded-up napkins. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, actual fear instead of her usual confidence. She asked why I would do this to her, and her voice sounded small and old, nothing like her usual brash stage voice. I told her she did this to herself when she turned my suicide attempt into a comedy routine at my engagement party in front of 50 people. When she let Rachel teach Tyler to hit me and call me poor. The words came out flat and hard, and I watched her face crumple. She started crying, but not the dramatic way she usually cried when she wanted something. This was different, uglier, with her makeup running in black streaks down her cheeks. She said I'd ruined her reputation in the Toronto comedy community, that these people were her only friends, that I'd taken away the one thing that made her feel like she mattered. "You took away my dignity," I said. "You took away my mental health crisis and turned it into entertainment. You let Rachel teach your grandson to be abusive. What did you think would happen?" I stood up and grabbed my jacket off the back of the chair. She kept saying my name, asking me to wait, to let her explain, but I walked out and left her sitting there alone. The hallway outside felt too bright and too quiet, and I could still hear her crying through the door. I didn't feel as good about what I'd done as I thought I would. I just felt tired and mean and like I'd swallowed glass. Marcus called me 3 times that night, but I let it go to voicemail because I didn't know how to explain what I'd just done. When I finally listened to the messages the next morning, his voice sounded worried and confused, asking if I was okay, and saying both Diane and Rachel had called him, crying about me, attacking them in public. I felt rage flood back into my chest, because of course they'd already called him. Of course they were spinning this to make themselves the victims, just like they always did with everything. But then Marcus's third message was different. He said, "Whatever you did, I'm sure they deserved it. Call me when you're ready." That made me cry. Real tears, not the angry kind. The next day, Rachel showed up at my apartment. I saw her through the peephole and almost didn't open the door, but I knew she wouldn't leave. She looked rough, hair messy, no makeup, wearing sweats. I opened the door, and she pushed past me into the living room. "Tyler's been asking why you hate him," she said. "He doesn't understand why you embarrassed us like that." I don't hate Tyler, I said. I hate what you're teaching him. You're raising him to think it's okay to hit people, Rachel. To think money makes someone worth more than someone else. He's 6 years old. He didn't mean anything by it. Then why did you give him a cookie? Why did you reward him for hitting me? She didn't have an answer for that. Just stood there with her mouth opening and closing like a fish. I told her about the credit cards, about how I'd had to work 2 jobs to pay off her debt while she partied, about how she'd destroyed my relationship with Grandma by lying about the college fund, about how she'd slept with Jake just to hurt me, not because she even liked him. You've spent your whole life trying to bring me down, I said, and now you're teaching Tyler to do the same thing. What kind of mother does that? She started crying then, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She'd had years to apologize, years to make things right, and she'd chosen to double down every single time. Marcus's parents are talking about disowning him if he marries into our family, I said. His dad called him yesterday and said we need to postpone the wedding. Do you get that? Your behavior, Mom's behavior, it's destroying my life. Then maybe you shouldn't be so ashamed of your own family, Rachel shot back. Maybe if you weren't such a snob. I'm not ashamed of being poor, Rachel. I'm ashamed of how you act. There's a difference. She left after that, slamming my door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. 2 days later, I got a call from Tyler's daycare. The director said Tyler had hit another child, and when they asked him why, he said, because they're poor and they deserve it. The daycare wanted to know where he'd learned that behavior. Rachel had to pick him up early. The other kids' parents were threatening to pull their child from the program. Rachel called me screaming, blaming me for ruining Tyler's life, saying it was my fault for putting ideas in his head. I recorded the call, sent it to Marcus so he could hear how delusional she was. Marcus's parents invited both me and Diane to dinner at their house in Oakville to clear the air before the wedding. They specifically did not invite Rachel, which said everything. I knew this was some kind of test. Diane promised she'd behave and apologize properly, that she understood how serious this was. I didn't trust her to get through one meal without making everything about her somehow, but I agreed to go because I didn't have a choice. Marcus told me this dinner was important to his family, that his mother was really struggling with whether she could support our marriage given everything that had happened. The dinner was exactly as awful as I expected. Marcus's mother was coldly polite in that way wealthy people are when they hate you but have manners. His father barely spoke, just passed dishes and cut his food with these precise movements that felt angry. Diane launched into an apology that started okay but somehow turned into excuses about her difficult childhood in Scarborough and struggling as a single mother and never having any support. Marcus's mother let her talk for maybe 2 minutes before cutting her off mid-sentence. Many people have hard lives without exploiting their children's trauma for attention and entertainment. Many single mothers don't teach their grandchildren to be violent. The words hung in the air and Diane's face went red and then white. Marcus's father set down his fork. I want to know if you plan to use my son's wedding as material too. If you've already started working on jokes about our family, about how we're snobs, or how we're uptight, or whatever narrative helps you avoid taking responsibility for your actions. The question was so direct and brutal that even I felt defensive of Diane for a second before remembering that he was right to ask. Diane's mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out at first. I watched her chest rise and fall in quick, shallow movements like she couldn't get enough air. She grabbed the edge of the table with both hands, her knuckles turning white, and when she finally spoke, her voice came out small and broken. No, she said. I won't. I promise. And what about your other daughter? Marcus's mother asked. Rachel. The one who's teaching her son that violence is acceptable? Rachel won't be giving a speech either, I said quickly. Actually, I'm not sure Rachel's coming to the wedding at all. Marcus's parents exchanged a look. His father nodded slightly, like I'd said the right thing. The rest of the dinner was tense but civil. Diane didn't make any jokes, didn't try to perform. She actually seemed genuinely scared of losing me completely. When we left, Marcus walked me to my car. Thank you for standing up to Rachel, he said. My parents were impressed. I should have done it years ago, I said. Maybe. But you did it now, and that's what matters. Asterisk, asterisk. Before we keep going, I gotta ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between family and your own well-being? Why is it so hard to set boundaries with the people who raised us? I'm still trying to figure that out myself. Drop a comment if you've ever been in this position, because I know I'm not alone in this. Asterisk, asterisk. 3 days before the wedding, Rachel showed up at my apartment again. This time, Tyler was with her. He looked small and scared, holding his mom's hand. His eyes were red like he'd been crying. Rachel nudged him forward. Tyler has something to say to you, she said, her voice hoarse. Tyler looked up at me with big eyes, and I could see he was trembling slightly. I'm sorry I hit you, Auntie. Mommy says it was wrong and I should never hit people. Never, ever. I crouched down to his level, bringing my face to his height. My knees cracked a bit. I'm only 28, but apparently that's old enough for creaky joints. Thank you for apologizing, Tyler. That was very brave. Do you understand why hitting is wrong? He nodded, his little chin wobbling. Because it hurts people. And because Mommy said it doesn't matter if someone has money or not. Everyone deserves to be treated nice. My throat tightened. I looked up at Rachel and saw she had tears streaming down her face. Mommy says you're not poor. She says you're just different from us. Tyler's voice was so small, so confused. But I don't understand what that means. I took his small hands in mine. It means that people make different choices in life, buddy. Your mom and grandma like certain things, and I like different things. But none of that makes anyone better or worse than anyone else. We're all just trying our best. Does that make sense? He nodded slowly, then threw his arms around my neck and hugged me tight. I hadn't been expecting it and almost fell backward, catching myself with one hand on the floor. I love you, Auntie, he whispered into my shoulder. I don't want you to be sad anymore. I hugged him back, tears pricking at my own eyes now. Over his shoulder, I looked at Rachel. She was covering her mouth with her hand, sobbing silently. I'm sorry, she said quietly when Tyler pulled away. I'm sorry for everything. For Jake, God, Jake was 10 years ago and I'm still sorry. For the credit cards, for the engagement party, for Tyler, for every mean text, for every time I made you feel small, all of it. I'm so sorry. Why now? I asked, standing up slowly, my knees protesting. Rachel, we're 28 years old. We've been doing this dance our entire lives. Why now? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, mascara smearing. Because Tyler's therapist said he's developing behavioral problems. Because the daycare director pulled me aside last week and said if there's one more incident, he's out. They said he's becoming aggressive with other kids, that he talks about money constantly, comparing who has what. She took a shaky breath. But it was more than that. I was picking him up from daycare and I heard him tell another kid, my mommy says your shoes are cheap. And the kid started crying. And I saw myself, you know? I saw Mom. I saw this ugly, mean thing that I'd created. And I realized I'm turning him into a monster. Into us. She started crying harder now. Not the manipulative crying she usually did, but real, gut-wrenching sobs that made her whole body shake. I don't want him to be like me, like Mom. I don't want him to think it's okay to hurt people. I don't want him to grow up and look back and realize his mom was a bully, who taught him to be a bully too. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her to get out, that it was too little too late. But another part of me saw Tyler standing there, looking confused and sad, and I thought about how none of this was his fault. Therapy, I said. Real therapy. For both of you. Not the kind where you perform or make excuses. Real work. Rachel nodded. Already started, twice a week. And you need to make amends. Not just to me, to everyone you've hurt. I know. I invited them in, made Tyler hot chocolate, talked to him about how hitting people is never okay, no matter what anyone says. He listened, really listened. In that way kids do when they know something important is happening. Rachel sat on my couch and told me about her first therapy session, how the therapist had asked her why she competed with me so much, why she needed to tear me down to feel good about herself. She said she didn't have a good answer. We talked for 2 hours. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The wedding happened on a beautiful day in the Distillery District. Diane sat quietly in the third row with Lucy, her support person. She wore a simple blue dress and didn't make a single scene. Rachel sat in the back with Tyler and her husband. She'd asked if she could come, and I'd said yes on the condition that she understood there would be no speech, no jokes, no performance of any kind. The ceremony was beautiful. Marcus said his vows and I said mine without any interruptions. When Tyler saw me walking down the aisle, he waved at me, and I waved back. At the reception, I watched Rachel approach Marcus's parents. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I saw her talking without any of her usual dramatic gestures. Marcus's mother's face stayed neutral, but she nodded when Rachel finished. It wasn't warm, but it was civil. Diane came up to me during the reception. You look beautiful, she said simply. No joke, no punchline, just a straightforward compliment. Thanks, Mom. I'm proud of you, she said, for standing up to me, for protecting yourself. I wish I'd learned how to do that when I was your age. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just hugged her. It was brief and awkward, but it was real. 6 weeks after the wedding, I started meeting Diane for coffee every Thursday morning at a place halfway between our apartments, near Dundas West Station. The first few meetings were awkward, with both of us being too careful about what we said. I'd made a list of topics that were off limits, things she couldn't ask about or turn into comedy material, and she actually followed the rules without complaining. She didn't ask about Marcus's income, didn't make jokes about the wedding, didn't mention any of my past relationships or failures. She told me about her therapy sessions in a real way, not performing or exaggerating for effect, just talking about what she was learning about herself. She admitted her therapist had pointed out that she'd used comedy as a weapon to keep people at a distance, that if she made them laugh or shocked them first, she didn't have to risk real connection or vulnerability. The therapist asked me why I needed to perform all the time, Diane said one Thursday, stirring her coffee slowly. Why I couldn't just be, and I didn't have an answer. Or I did, but I didn't want to admit it. What was the answer? I asked. She looked out the window at the people walking past on Dundas. That being funny was the only thing I was good at, the only thing that made people pay attention to me. Without it, I was just nothing. Just this woman who screwed up her life at 16 and never recovered. You're not nothing, Mom. I know that now. Or I'm learning it. Anyway. It's hard, though. Relearning everything you've believed about yourself for 50 years. Rachel and I started having dinner once a month. She brought Tyler, and we'd go to kid-friendly places where he could run around, places like the ROM or the Science Center, where he could burn off energy and learn something at the same time. I watched her correct him when he said something mean, watched her teach him about kindness and respect. One time at the Science Center, Tyler asked another kid what his dad did for work. Before the kid could answer, Rachel gently interrupted. Tyler, remember what we talked about? People's jobs aren't what makes them interesting or important. Let's ask about what he likes to do for fun instead. Tyler nodded seriously and turned back to the kid. Do you like dinosaurs? I love dinosaurs. I caught Rachel's eye and she gave me a small, tired smile. It was slow, but it was real progress. She was trying, really trying, and that meant something. At one of our dinners, about 4 months after the wedding, Rachel brought up the credit cards again. I called all 3 collection agencies, she said. Explained what happened, that it was identity theft. They said it's too late to reverse everything, but they're willing to work with me on a payment plan. I'm going to pay you back, every cent, plus interest. Rachel, no. She held up her hand. This is important. You spent years cleaning up my mess. Years. While I was out buying designer shit and going to clubs, you were working 2 jobs and eating ramen. That's not okay. It was never okay. She pulled out a piece of paper from her purse. It was a payment plan, all laid out in her handwriting. $300 a month for 5 years. That'll cover the original $15,000 plus interest and some compensation for what you went through. I already made the first payment into your account yesterday. I checked my phone. Sure enough, there was an e-transfer from Rachel for $300, with the note, first of many. I'm sorry. Our relationships would never be normal or easy. The damage was too deep and went back too far. But I was learning that protecting myself didn't mean I had to completely destroy them, that I could have boundaries without needing revenge. That healing was possible, even when you didn't think it was. Marcus and I were building our life together in our condo near the waterfront, making plans for the future without the constant fear hanging over everything. We talked about kids one day, about whether we'd let Diane and Rachel be part of their lives, about how to break the cycle. I think you already broke it, Marcus said one night as we were getting ready for bed. Just by recognizing it, by standing up to them, by refusing to accept that their behavior was normal or okay. I hurt them, though. I exposed all their secrets in front of everyone they knew. They hurt you first, for years, and they used a child as a weapon. You defended yourself. I still flinched sometimes when my phone rang and I saw Diane's or Rachel's names, still worried they'd slip back into their old patterns. But each coffee with Diane that went well, each dinner with Rachel, where Tyler was kind and thoughtful, built a little more trust. But for now, having coffee with Mom once a week and dinner with Rachel once a month, all with clear rules, felt manageable. And that was enough. I was finally free from waking up every day wondering when I'd become their next punchline, free from being treated like I was worth less because I had less money. And that freedom was worth more than any apology they could give me. Tyler asked me last week if I forgave his mommy for teaching him bad things. I told him the truth, that forgiveness is complicated, that sometimes we love people and are still angry with them at the same time, that healing takes a long time. He thought about it and then said, "But you still come to dinner with us." "Yeah, buddy, I do." "That's good," he said, "because you're my favorite auntie." And you know what? That made everything worth it. So that's my story, eh? The story of how a 6-year-old slap across my face became the wake-up call I needed to finally stand up to my family. I'm really glad you stuck around because this stuff feels better when it's shared. Let me know in the comments what you think. Did I go too far, or was I justified? And more importantly, how do we break these cycles with our own families? How do we teach the next generation to be better than we were? Because that's the real question, isn't it? Thanks for listening, everyone. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. And remember, you deserve respect, no matter how much money you have or don't have. Don't let anyone teach you otherwise. Take care of yourselves out there.